There are lots of you joining us. There's so many of you joining us. I'm always so worried because obviously in the UK it's the middle of the afternoon whether people are going to be able to come on live, but it's awesome that you're making and carving out that time. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to join us. Please say hello to us. We want to be connected to you. Say hello. Where are you tuning in from? And how is your day going? How are you feeling right now?
Mm.
How are you feeling? We were just talking about how we were all feeling, which is nothing but on top of the world, obviously. I'm joking, we're all human. How are you all doing? And can we
Good
all
afternoon, everybody from sunny Spain. Lovely to see you all. Goodness, look at all of you from all over the world. How
wow,
exciting!
Yeah, so fantastic.
amazing. Amazing. Boston,
Chicago,
Chicago,
Boston,
New York, New Jersey, London. Incredible. Can we all
yay,
just
New
take a moment to
Jersey.
appreciate Bonnie's glam level today? And I arrived on the call. I was like, oh
Speaking.
God, Bonnie's looking particularly glamorous today.
Oh gosh. I'm fired up because it's at the end of Women's History Month and the profession of assisting is mostly women. And so I'm wearing my Ruth Bader Ginsburg collar to give us all strength.
Yeah. What would
There
Ruth
we go.
do? That's a good way of living your life. What would Ruth do?
What
When,
would Ruth do?
yeah.
Yeah, you know, I keep her quote in my office, to fight for the things you believe in, but do it in a way that bring others towards you, you
Yes.
know.
Yes. Yes.
Ugh,
Definitely.
Yeah.
too
Oh,
I
much
I just saw
meanness these days.
Clara. Clara from Japan, who I know has stayed up. It's almost, well, it's gone 11 o'clock at night for her, and I just saw her pop up there. So hello, Clara. Lovely to see
Hi,
you here
Clara.
today.
Hello, everyone. Oh my gosh, so many
Abby.
friends.
Hello. Oh,
Wonderful.
fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And we've got a lot to cover. Your questions came pouring in, which is what we hoped for most. And you're going to get a really lovely transatlantic view of the world. And nothing better than having people that all have really different perspectives and so experienced. So let's share a little bit about our amazing event today. Now, I wanted us to kick off with a quote that I heard yesterday at an event, and we had an event that we had a speaker at an event that was talking about creating a more equitable world of work. I've never hosted an event before where the word vagina has been used so many times, but we had to go with it. Yes, it was a new style of event, ladies, and I think all the
Okay.
men left the room slightly shell-shocked, but the speaker said, Rita said, do you want to be heard or do you want to create change? And it was so interesting because they are two very different things, right? And I
Mm.
think the three of us are really looking to make change happen over being heard. And I think that makes this session so galvanized and energized, and why so many people want to come and share space with us. So we're really grateful. And I'm obviously with two incredible women today, and that is Bonnie Low-Kramen, the most extraordinary change maker, thought leader, trainer extraordinaire, a woman that deeply knows the challenges, the excitement, the opportunity that goes with an EA career, having supported Olivia Ducasse. No, I've just pronounced that quite incorrectly. I'm
Great.
having a menopausal moment.
Kiss.
Dukakis.
Dukakis.
That's it. I can remember the name for a flip chart the other day. Anyway, and having supported Olivia, she knows, she understands deeply, but also understands how to get to where you want to be, to think, act, and feel ultimately for the better. And then we have the amazing Lucy Brazier OBE, author, CEO of Marcham Publishing, the godmother of this industry. There is nobody that I don't know that isn't inspired, motivated, and that wants to create a more equitable world of work for the assistant profession, that is absolutely dedicated to you all being seen as talent over a resource. And so the three of us are here to help answer your questions, to give insights, to give our viewpoints. And I'm going to kick off with Bonnie, just in terms of, it's been a few weeks since we last spoke. What's on your mind? What's sort of coming up for you at 3:30 in the morning that's bothering you, that you know that you know needs to change right now?
Yeah. Hi, good morning. I was so looking forward to being with the two of you and with this international crowd on the call today. We're having this international party and none of us had to cook. It's amazing.
My kind of party, by the way.
I know, that's how I always think of these gatherings. You know what's clear? I was reviewing all the questions that you sent, and the theme, the common thread through all of these questions seemed to be the theme of uncertainty. The idea that none of us really knows what next week is going to be, because there's all of this talk about ChatGPT and Copilot and AI taking over, and what skills do we need? And the assistants of the world are. It feels to me like there's an urgency to figure this thing out fast, really fast, because leaders are making decisions. Um, I still think the world is moving far faster than our ability to keep up with all the changes that are happening. And so since we last spoke, one of the disconcerting things I heard, for example, was that a hiring manager used AI to create a job description. And when people were reading the job description, it was clear that a robot made it, because no one human could do it. You know what I mean? Like, the humans are needed. And that's the big conversation, the worry that I have, is that the assistants of the world are still desperately needed, probably more than ever.
Yeah, I love that. And Lucy, for you, what's keeping you up at night right now?
Oh my goodness, I'm actually quite excited. I just got back from Wellington, where we were running live, but also where I was facilitating on the World Administrators Summit, which, for those of you that don't know what it was, it's kind of the equivalent of the G7 for the profession. And so much incredible conversation there. And yes, Bonnie is absolutely correct. And so are you, Lucy, that we are in this acute state of change. And that means that everything is moving so fast. And Bonnie is very fond of saying that it is really scary place to be because everything is changing so fast. But it's also, I think, very exciting because everything is changing so fast. And we're aware that the world of work is still in an acute state of change, and that actually that creates opportunities when we step into feeling excited about it rather than fearful about it. And really the conversation there, I think, I'll give you a really good example. There was a 2-hour session from Lisbeth Colloco-Green on AI, where literally you could see the body language as the people sat down for that session, very much fearful, very much, is it going to take our job? I don't know how I'm going to get my head around this. This is so advanced. And by the end of it, they were just like, oh my word, this isn't going to take my job. This is going to enhance my job 1,000,000 times over. And I'm so excited to get going with it and to see what I can actually do if I play with it. So I think you're right. I think there is so much stuff in the press. There's so much. If you were to read LinkedIn, you'd think the press profession was going to disappear tomorrow quite often, and that we were all terribly downtrodden and it was terrible. But do you know what? This year, for the very first time, I'm seeing businesses who are really starting to understand what it is that the assistant is there for. And that's a huge step forward. But you all have to be the change. And that means you understanding it. We can our arms around as much as we like. Unless you go and have those conversations, it's not going to happen. So I'm hoping some of the conversation today will help you to do that.
Ah, yes, great openings from both of you. And I'm going to share what's keeping me up a little bit. But it's only a call to action. I've had 3 conversations with clients over the last 2 weeks and heard the same thing, which is a movement towards low-cost location hiring for admins. And this, for me, is really interesting because it's clearly a pattern in certain sizes of businesses, which basically means finding countries where you can hire admin professionals at a much lower cost than perhaps in New York or in London or other major cities in the world. And so there is a gap, isn't there, between how the profession is perceived in terms of the value add, if there is the notion that somehow it can be completed without any ability to create the relationship, the culture add, the connection piece. And for me, it was really, I challenged them a lot on it because I felt that ultimately they were looking at it as a transactional skills focused role rather than that capability to make tomorrow happen, which is ultimately what an assistant does. And so that for me was something I really wanted to ask you both about, is how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts? And how do we ensure that it becomes very patently obvious that that is not the solution very quickly?
Want to start, Lucy?
I don't mind either way. I mean, for me, I actually got into quite an argument with somebody about it who specializes in hiring people from areas where maybe they aren't paid as much as the assistants are paid in first world countries. And he was saying that I had got my thinking totally wrong, because in those countries, they were just as good assistants, and actually paying them less meant that they were earning good salaries where they lived. And I kind of saw what he meant, but I also very much feel that this role is so much about communication. When things go wrong, it is because the communication piece isn't in place. And I think you're absolutely correct, Lucy. I think if we are going to be expecting assistants to work at the highest level, that means understanding business strategy. That means understanding what the direction of the organization is that you're heading in, understanding where your executive fits in as part of that, and very much being part of the team. In fact, what we're trying to say when we're talking all the time to organizations is, for goodness sake, don't keep your assistant out here. Allow them into the leadership meetings. Allow them to hear what's going on. Let them get to a point where they really understand the business as well as you do. Because as Simone White is forever saying, you are subject matter experts in your own right. So to me, it's a step backwards. What it's saying is, let's take them out of the business. Let's put them to one side. Let's get them doing just the transactional stuff, and then let's see where we go from there. And I personally really hope that unless we want people literally doing the transactional stuff, and then the people who are actually in the business step up and get promoted to higher levels, maybe that's a thought. But I'm thinking off the top of my head here.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
You know, what this is all about continues to be the education piece that's needed for leaders and HR about what this role really is. The newsletters I read every single day from Fortune magazine and Inc. are all talking about, and on April 24th, Lucy, Brazier, you and I are doing an event with Doug Conant, former CEO of Campbell Soup. And he just came out with a very big newsletter about the singular quality that leaders want in 2024. And it is trust. It is, they want to trust the people around them. And they certainly need to trust the executive assistant who's right by their side. And that means, I don't know that a leader is going to, if that is true, if we think that's true, then no robot is going to be more trustworthy than you all, the executive assistants. And frankly, no $5 an hour assistant 3,000 miles away or however many miles away is going to be as trustworthy as you, whether the executive assistant is working in person or remotely. But you get what you pay for. I mean, that has always been true. That is still true. And, Olympia Dukakis and I used to say to each other sometimes, you can't blame them for trying. It's one of those things that sounds like a good idea because we could save so much money, but no. You really do get what you pay for. How about we have a trustworthy executive assistant and using her or him to find other resources for those transactional type of tasks that are needed. But in the C-suite, it's going to be a human. It's always going to be that way, as long as the humans are in charge. That's what I think. Lucy, I'm wondering, what was your conversation with these executives? Did it just end, or were you able to convince them? Were you able to educate?
That's an interesting one. I think ultimately when a decision is purely based on cost, it's very difficult to challenge. And until they try it, and I don't know if you remember, but PricewaterhouseCoopers tried this, PwC, they moved a huge amount of their admin professionals out of London and to virtual. And then what happened? They moved it all back again because ultimately people need people. And to do that, you need to be able to connect with them effectively, share ideas, you get understanding the nuances of mood change and all of those things that happen when you have that physical presence with each other. And it doesn't need to be 5 days a week, but in 2-3 days a week, it makes an enormous difference to that trust level, I think, that you've just described. And that's yeah, go on, Lucy.
Sorry, I think it's part of a bigger issue, actually, which is something that I've been writing about quite a lot recently, which is the fact that assistants are so often seen as a cost. I actually had one executive who told me quite recently that his cost center wouldn't allow him to increase the headcount. And I said, okay, so your headcount is saying currently that you have some assistants who are looking after 15 people because your business has doubled in the last 2 years, but you haven't increased your headcount. And actually, assistants aren't a cost. What they are a cost saving and efficiency. So really it's about thinking about that whole piece in a different way. They save cost, they make your team more efficient, they make the executive more efficient, and actually across the business they should be contributing to the bottom line. So it isn't just the dead cost when you're employing an assistant. You need to look at what they're actually doing to save the executive's time, otherwise there's no point.
I could not agree more. And I was chatting to an senior EA at GIC yesterday, who at the end of every month will do a very brief synopsis of the month for her execs. She supports 3. And then she says, these are the additional ways that I can add value to you next month. This is how I can put that into action. And this is what the result would be. Are you happy for me to go ahead and take on some of those projects or attend X meetings? And she said that it's everyone in the organization has been talking about it because all of a sudden she's been given a level of trust and responsibility that is just unprecedented. And I think that's a really good way to drive change, because although we all want change to happen by osmosis, as Lucy and Bonnie both say frequently, we have to be the change we want to see in any area that we want to create difference in. It doesn't matter whether it's at home, relationships, work. And so I thought that was a really interesting way to help drive the perception of herself, her personal brand, but also being able to shape and change her role. So it is that level of indispensability that is unquestionable.
Right. Now, will every leader be ready to hear that? Probably not, is the thing. I believe the message from all 3 of us is that the assistants of the world need to take a fresh look at what's happening right now and to be assertive about articulating to HR and to leaders what we are capable of. It's a new day. I mean, that is what I'm seeing every single day. In the post-pandemic world, we're past the red hot emergency. So now the dust has settled some. And what we're seeing are companies with workplaces that are broken. And assistants are in a unique seat to see what those issues are and the solutions. What it will require, though, is speaking to it, is having those conversations and having the gumption to do what you just described, Lucy C. And hopefully leaders can come on board faster, given the realities of the workplace, is that it's going to be recognized that the assistants of the world really are problem solvers and have the solutions to so many of the problems that they face.
Yeah, I completely agree. Lucy. Oh, Lucy,
you're on mute, Lucy. You were so excited.
I'm sneezing because I only got off a plane yesterday, so I'm yes, still sneezing. Yeah, I think I'm so interested watching the way that this chat is going to one side, and I want to be absolutely clear here. What we're not talking about is that I know assistants from all over the world who are exceptional. This isn't a India doesn't have good assistants, you know, Pakistan doesn't have good assistants. What this is a situation where I'm saying there are assistants at every level who are amazing all over the world. But when a business is saying, what I want is to pay $5 an hour so that I can chuck work at them and it comes back and I don't actually have to deal with them, and I don't want them to be part of a team, that's an entirely different role to the role that we're talking about when we're trying to advance the profession. Don't you think?
I couldn't agree more. And the training that I've been doing recently has been focused very, very, very much on bringing into the conscious our patterns of behavior in order that we can deeply understand our potential and bring that forward, and how we do that in a way that feels win-win for everybody. And what I see with that opportunity to have conversations where we meet each other, whether it's our execs or the CEO, I'm okay, you're okay, from that real sort of adult to adult place. What happens then is that if we place ourselves on that professional, as you say, that middle management level, and we're bringing forward solutions to challenges that the business is facing or the team is facing, or an opportunity that you see to enhance culture, that's when the perception piece starts to shift and change. And then how could you possibly perceive somebody as somebody that just churns out work when you are stepping into what's needed for the organization to perform at its very best? And I think, and I know that there isn't that opportunity in form for everybody, and for all organizations, they're not going to necessarily embrace that. But I think that that is where the opportunity lies, and that's where the gap is at the moment in understanding of the relevance potential.
I see something else in play also in all the reading I'm doing and in the conversations I'm having with HR leaders and actual executives. And that is that, so we all seem to agree that the pandemic threw human resource departments into chaos. You know, it put pressure on that department in a way that seriously was unprecedented. And that's still kind of straightening itself out. But now there's new pressure on HR to use AI for HR solutions. And HR professionals have told me, Bonnie, we know that job descriptions for EAs are not accurate. We know that their titles are not reflective of what they actually do. And we know that their compensation is probably not in line with what's fair, but we have no time to deal with it. And so my message here is that there is a lot of volatility added. And in addition, we've got company staff working in a hybrid way, remote way, some are in person. So, you know, we've got high-level executive assistants who may officially have to come in 3 days a week, but you're telling me, EAs are telling me they're choosing to go in 4 and 5 days a week because it makes sense for the business. They're being proactive in terms of looking at the situation and saying, you know what, I really should be there for that meeting. I really should be there to organize that, you know, the technology in that session. And then, so, you know, my suggestion for every assistant out there in light of this volatile landscape is to just calm it down and take a very fresh look at the situation in your particular company, because it's not one size fits all, to see where you can fill the gap, and then to raise your hand and say, I'd really like to be involved in the rolling out of Microsoft Copilot, for example. You know, it's going to require an assertiveness from EAs that we have rarely called them to do before, I think.
Well, Lucy, what would you like to add to that?
I think it's so interesting when you're saying that HR departments are using AI in order to work out what they're doing with their EAs because they don't have time, because we know the data is entirely outdated. So they're working off data which was last revised in 2018, that isn't going to be revised again until 2028. And therefore, you know, actually the information is total nonsense. And the role, as we know, has changed totally since COVID. Totally, because all that proactive stuff is where the role is heading, and all the reactive stuff is going. It will go to AI. So the assistants are changing in the way that they are doing their roles. It isn't anymore about the tea and typing piece. It isn't anymore about being told to add things to the calendar and having hundreds of people throwing stuff into the calendar and trying to play Tetris with that and maybe doing a little bit of email management, whatever. It is about having control of it and understanding that your role is to manage their time and to everything that involves. Everything that involves. And what that means is, and I said it before, some of you will have heard me say it before, but it's like having a metaphorical pile of papers that we're calling the work and going, well, that's something I can do. Half of that is something that I can do, and they can have the other half. That I don't understand at all. So that's clearly theirs.
Yeah.
But it isn't waiting to be told what to do. What it's all about is, and if your HR departments aren't getting that, and they are looking on AI to see what the role of an assistant is, they're not going to get the correct picture. What they need to be doing is to be looking at the global skills matrix and the kind of skills that are required by the top companies in the world now for their assistants. The forward-thinking companies are really getting it and starting to use their assistants properly to make sure that their executive salaries are best spent. And if they're not doing that, maybe you can suggest it. It's a free resource, the Global Skills Matrix. I shall go put it into the chat box in a minute. I'm sure Helen Monument from the World Administrators Alliance will do it if she's sitting out there. I think there. Yes, amazing. But go, take a look at it, because it is going to be your best friend if you want to paint a picture for your organizations as to what it is you should be doing. And it helps them to measure your performance as well. And if you can measure it, you can improve it. And isn't that what we want? We want to be world class as administrative professionals.
You know, the truth is, your leaders don't have all the answers. They can't possibly have all the answers because of the really extreme demands on them at this moment. And so, Lucy B., you're absolutely right that it can't be that we're waiting to be told what to do. The executive assistants of the world, I'm particularly excited by lighting a fire and kind of activating this group to see that leaders don't have all the answers. HR is in a bit of a pickle right now because they're still being fragmented and fractured by their demands. The assistants can be the ones to bring what you do really well, which is stability and organization, and be the one to understand the difference between Copilot and ChatGPT and experiment and play around. And if your company is saying, no, we're not using it yet, do it on your own personal computer so that you know the vocabulary. You know, just as simple as, Vicki Evans was explaining to us the other day, it's no longer Bing, it's Copilot. It's no longer Bard, it's now Gemini. Like, we need to know the language, the words that we weren't talking about 6 months ago, a year ago, and that's the assistants who do that. You're not going to be unemployed.
Yeah. And it isn't AI that's going to take your jobs. It's people who understand AI that are going to take your jobs. And it is not a product, it's a skill. So go learn the skill, because I don't know about you. Well, Bonnie will remember because we're both old, but Lucy won't because she's very young. But you remember when the internet came in, Bonnie, and people were saying, the internet is a fad. It's going to go. It's just nonsense, really. And here we are all these years later, and it's so integrated in our lives. And AI is the same thing. Let's get into it really early so that we are the experts.
Yeah, it's still a baby. It's still running around in diapers. There's a comment in the chat I want to bring forward, and that is the whole notion of proximity bias, that, the assistants of the world, you are nothing if not the pragmatic people who are looking at a situation for what it really is. You're not, you need to know when the flight is, not when you hope it would be. And so there's a movement out there that, the reality is that the people who are choosing to go into the office to have proximity to leaders actually do have an advantage over people who are at remote and hybrid, and sometimes there's no way to change that except to know that it is a risk factor. And so, the challenge is, how do we be visible over webcam and, totally remotely? That's a conversation for you and leaders. Leadership is becoming, there's a lot of pressure on leadership to actually lead. How do you lead a workforce that's partially hybrid, partially in the office? Like, that's a new challenge for leaders, and you can be helpful to them in managing that. That's a new thing. It's like, who prepared anybody for that? Nobody.
Yeah. And I think what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, there has definitely, for me, from the recruiter's perspective, over the last 18 months specifically, been a real shift in what our clients are asking for in terms of skill set. And certainly for me, what I would be focusing on, additionally to what's already been shared by Lucy and Bonnie, which is obviously exactly what you ought to be doing, is asking yourself, how much time am I spending in the weeds during my week? And how much time am I spending in terms of that critical thinking piece? So what I mean by that is, what our clients are asking for more and more are skills like an expert communicator. They're asking for critical thinking and problem solvers, but they're also asking a lot, and this is new for us, for people that have business development capability. Now, they're not saying that you need to go out and sell at all. What they're saying is an awareness that the client is king, and how are they, your executives, on top of those relationships? What suggestions have you got? Have you prompted them that they need to be meeting X or Y? Have you prompted them that actually you've just seen a press release from one of their key clients? Have they congratulated that client? So what a lot of our clients are asking for is people that are the eyes and ears for their bosses alongside their executives, seeing the opportunities, having that intentional focus on making sure that their executives are enhancing those relationships to the best of their capabilities, driven by their assistants. And that's definitely new over the last year. And so certainly a skill that I would be looking to enhance as an executive assistant.
There's so many ways they can do that, actually, Lucy, and I love it. And although assistants always go when you mention sales in any kind of way, actually, I've never known a group of people who can get so much stuff for free. They negotiate like crazy, They're absolutely amazing when it comes to negotiating down pricing. But for an executive, it can be as simple as they're going on a business trip to New York. While they're there seeing those two people, who else can they see so that we're maximizing their capacity while they're there? Or if your executive is going off on a sales meeting, could you prepare a briefing document for them that explains exactly what the history is and what the opportunities are, so that it's really easy for them to read on the way? Or are you looking, thinking, well, actually, maybe we should be thinking about that person who's been on our radar for ages from another organization that we might like to collaborate with? It's just, Jermaine does it for me all the time, my assistant. She says to me, well, while you're there, that organization is in town and you might want to go and have a chat with them. It's wonderful. And it's a really great way for you to make sure that your executive is maximizing their time, and that, again, the organization is getting value out of you.
Well, another thing that I love on that, and I don't know what your thoughts are, both of you, is assistants that are now proactively going out and meeting assistants from the organizations that are key clients to have a coffee, to grab a sandwich, creating that power of the network, influence, impact through that level of proactivity, which is undoubtedly going to enhance both your knowledge, your capability to make that difference, but also the success of the organization that you work for.
I saw very recently on Facebook, and it made me laugh so much, that in one of the groups there was one of the assistants saying, my executive's been in a terrible mood all morning, and I eventually gathered up courage to say what was the matter. And he said, I've been trying to get an appointment with this person all morning and they're not returning my calls. And the EA said, if only they'd asked me, when will they ever learn? I've known the assistant for the last 2 years and I could have got him a meeting like that.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Bonnie, what would you add to that?
Well, my thought quickly went to all of the leadership conferences out there, right? That, the leaders, there's so many conferences. for the executives. And I've always thought that it made sense to involve the assistants at least one day of those conferences. How smart would that be? Now, it doesn't happen like hardly ever, but at those events, that would be a wonderful place for there to be great networking among the assistants. Yeah, it's vital. We know that the workplace is just so complicated that we need as many resources as we can get. And so, however, there are only so many hours in a day. So I can kind of read the minds of people on the call right now is like, when am I going to have time for that? Really, it is about, I think, having conversations with executives to say, is this a smart use of my time? Because if it is a smart use of your time, then what other things should be coming off your plate? You know, because the segue in my mind is burnout, that we've got a lot of assistants who are burning out right now because there's, you know, leaders are scrambling. And so they're putting a lot on the executive assistants' plates, and burnout and mental health issues are happening. So it's not that all things can be solved. It just can't be solved by one person, right? That it could be time for number two assistant. And that's where executive assistants really show their true value, is to be able to evaluate the situation to say, well, I can do that, but that would mean this other thing would need to go to be delegated, kind of thing. And that's something that must happen in order for things to get better, I think.
Agreed. But I think you both also know that when we're teaching classes, the people who attend get as much from the other assistants as they do from the trainer.
Sure.
You know, it's one of the great benefits. And to me, when you are networking with other assistants, you're constantly learning, and you're learning about best practice too. And that can really help with the burnout, and it can help with the overextending yourself by not understanding the best way to do something. And, you know, as recently in Singapore with a group of 5 assistants there, who were all saying how amazing it was to get together, and that maybe they would work together to make sure that the network continued and grew, because Singapore is such a small place that really for them to get assistants at that level together on a regular basis to talk would have enormous business benefits. And I love that idea. So maybe, you know, have a think about it. Even actually, if you're not looking at your locality and people outside of your company, certainly there should be a network where your assistants within your organization are connected. Because so often I see assistants are siloed. They work right the way across the business in different departments. They never meet each other. I'm teaching a class at the moment where there are 35 assistants online, and most of them have never met each other. And really, I'm thinking, this is crazy. You've got somebody over here developing a travel plan, and someone over here who did it 3 years ago and did it way better. So what value is that to the business? Let them get together and talk about what it is that they're doing and learn the best practice and really elevate each other.
Yeah. And the other thing that springs to mind is something I've been talking to assistants about is, where's your plan? So often their diary is their executive's diary, and I'm saying to them, but where's your diary plan for the week? You know, where's your strategic objectives? How are you finishing your Friday, looking to next week and deciding what you're going to achieve, rather than that reactionary place of being driven purely by the diary, which obviously is there to be managed, anticipated, and that constant horizon scanning. But we need the admin professionals to also have their own strategic plan in their own diaries for the week. Otherwise, you'll never shift into that place, not truly, because what gets planned gets done, right? And there's nobody better at executing a plan than the assistant profession. So yeah. Okay, let's look to the next question. Let's look to the other ways. We won't get through a lot of your questions. So boundaries. This comes up every single time we hold one of these events, and we are not taught how to have difficult conversations. We're not taught how to handle big emotions, and we're certainly not taught how to handle and deliver and hold onto our boundaries, which are skills that all of us need in life. So from both of you, how does the assistant profession express boundaries whilst also making sure that doesn't damage trust or collaboration or all the things that people tend to worry about if they express a boundary?
I'll start. I am convinced that most executive assistants are not as clear as you could be about your full leverage, that your leaders do not want to lose you. And if there's one silver lining from the pandemic, it's that it threw the workplace into such turmoil that, new deals were, everything became negotiable. And caring for kids and parents and pets and whatever the no-fly zones were in your life became front and center. All of a sudden, webcams were bringing people into, your fellow staff into your home. So boundaries became really blurry during the pandemic. And now it's a time for a new conversation to say what you need to be successful. And conversely, you want to be involved in supporting your executives to also be successful. They can coexist. And if the fear is, I hear a lot, I'm afraid to speak up. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. I'm afraid I'm going to be labeled a troublemaker. It is about how you say it, choosing your moment, and my view is to be fact-based, to say what it is that you need to be successful in a sustained way, over time, for that they would much rather negotiate with a new set of criteria for you in most cases than to replace you. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, lovely
Fantastic.
reflections, Lucy.
Really, I love that, Bonnie. I hope that when they get the video, they go and they watch that back, because I couldn't have put that better myself. For me, I feel that assistants let themselves down by not speaking up. And what I mean by that, before you think I'm getting at you, is that when they come and they say to you, I need you to do this and I need it in the next 15 minutes, you have a choice. You can say yes and then try and do it in 15 minutes, but the product at the end of the day is going to be rubbish. Or you can say, well, you can have it, but it'll be in 2 hours' time. And then you can do it to the right standard. If you say, leave it with me, and you do it in 15 minutes and it's rubbish, it says you don't know what your work is, that you don't know what you're capable of. You're going to either deliver it substandard or you're going to deliver it late. And neither is any good. So really important that you find your voice, so that sort of things to me over the years. I've had them say that they allow social awkwardness to get in the way of them saying no. They believed they had to make it work. They thought that they were a problem solver. So if they said no, it would contradict that. It would cause problems if they said no. They were going to make them angry if they said no. They'd think they were incapable of doing their job properly if they said no. None of that stuff is true. None of that stuff is true. These are just stories that assistants tell themselves. And actually saying no can be really good for your career and for your mental health. But it's about you deciding what your boundaries are, being clear on that, and then training people how to treat you. I'm a great believer that we train people how to treat us. And if you're having real problems, maybe talk to your executive and say, we need to put some boundaries in place here. I had a girl on a course a little while back who was really tearful, and quite often when I'm training stress, they do get very tearful. There's at least 1 or 2. And she was saying to me she was looking after 70 people. Yes, you heard that correct. 70. And she said she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a weekend off. She was a single parent. She hadn't had a holiday in years. She really was past it. And she was getting more and more work. And I said to her, why don't you do a time audit? Why don't you sit and do a month of just writing what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and then take it to your exec and say, here, something has got to give. I love this company. I want to work for this company, but I am really on the verge of a burnout and I can't deal with that. And she did. And he was furious, but he was furious because of the fact that she had taken on so many other people's work. And it's, I don't know how many of you know the film Beetlejuice, but in Beetlejuice, if you say his name 3 times, it conjures up all sorts of mayhem. The psychology is the same number for saying no. If you say yes to something that isn't your job 3 times, it becomes your job. So you can say yes twice, but be very careful that you don't say yes a 3rd time, because otherwise it's going to become your job and all sorts of mayhem is going to be conjured up. So for me, we got her to a point where he gave all the jobs back to other people that weren't hers. And the last thing I heard from her, she was on a safari in Kenya. But to me, I just think, actually, if you allow it and you say yes to everything, you are going to be overwhelmed and you are going to burn out. Be very clear what your role is, which is to look after your executive or your executives and make sure that their time is best utilized. It's not to look after everybody else that wants to leave the office at 5 o'clock and thinks they might just chuck it at you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think boundaries are actually the foundation of a trust-based relationship, and ultimately, clear is kind. And when you don't hold boundaries, what happens is you start to gather those little stones that you carry in a bag of resentment, anger, frustration, and that doesn't lead to a great working relationship, productivity, ability to lead into challenge and change, because it's draining your battery the whole time. So actually, boundaries are the foundation of success, any form of successful relationship or successful being.
I'm watching the chat go, and Kelly, thank you for your comment that it took you years to find your voice. And Lucy and I spend our lives in rooms of assistance, and Lucy's, you hear this all the time, right? That it took me too long to find my voice, and I was working for one of the strongest women I've ever met, Olympia Dukakis. So I want to validate how much courage it takes to find your voice. And that's why we need mentorship. That's why we need support. That's why isolation and loneliness are serious risk factors today. We must set boundaries, new ones. I'm an advocate of starting them right from the beginning of these relationships, of these business relationships. But today is a great day to begin again, to take a look and to have that conversation. But it does take courage, because the fear can be debilitating. And that's why we need one another. So this is not easy stuff, but there's no other role in the world that is so dependent on other people. By definition, your work is about supporting someone else. But the reality is the assistants of the world are not making the salary that your executives are. You deserve to have a life. You deserve to be paid fairly. You deserve to have work you enjoy doing. Someone in the chat wrote that you know how it is to support 45 people and you got out of that role. Shame on the executives for letting that happen, number one. But number two is, a leader said to me, Bonnie, if nobody's complaining, I think there's no problem. We have to speak up.
Yeah, and self-esteem comes from esteemable acts. You can't think your way into a new way of thinking and feeling. You have to act your way into a new way of thinking and feeling. And nothing changes if nothing changes. And we have no choice but to use our voice if we want things to look and feel differently. And from my perspective, I think that for anybody that is interested in having a great relationship with themselves, that aspect of our esteem coming from esteemable acts and using our voice completely transforms the messaging we're giving to ourselves and then, of course, other people. And that's where the change bit comes, isn't it? That's where the ripple effect is. And I don't see any other area of a business struggling like the assistant profession with that ability to have some self-agency and to express and push back and to create change. And that's obviously because of lots of conditioning and traditional structures in businesses, and the fact that of course 97% of the industry is still female. So we've got lots of systemic issues to fight against, unfortunately. But if we all do it collectively, imagine what can happen, and change is possible. So Lucy, let's have a look at this next in the next question. So in terms of this thing about not being recognized, because this too is a common theme, isn't it? The lack of recognition or the value attached to the role. We've just talked a lot about how powerful, how important, those inspiring words from Bonnie about ultimately nothing happens and nothing can function in your business without you, and just how relied upon you are. What else needs to happen in order for that continued shift to occur?
think
My lovely
so
husband
much.
popped some water down by next to my desk, which I must grab.
I love him for you. Listen, I think that it is so much to do with your organization's understanding what it is that you actually do, because I don't think they do. It's so interesting. I run a class for executives, and you know that I'm just about to do a webinar on Administrative Professionals Day for executives, which I figured was going to be the best gift that I could give you all, and it's free if anybody wants to go looking for it. But when I run the class in-house, what I say at the beginning of the class is, right, on this wall, I want you to put all the things that you can get your assistant to do. And there are some post-it notes and they go up there. Then I do an hour of talking to them. And at the end of it, I say, right, now on this wall, I want you to put all the things that the assistant can do for you. And it's totally, totally different. And it is just about really, when I say to them, what is it that the organization employs your assistant to do? They say, oh, they're there to do the bits and pieces that we don't want to do. And they're there to fill the gaps. And they're there to look after my emails and book my travel and do my calendar. When I say to them, okay, I want to be very clear, it's the organization that employs your assistant, and they employ you to make sure that every minute of your time and every dollar of your salary is best spent. They look like I've hit them over the head. They go, well, of course that's what they're there to do. But they've never thought about it that way. And once they understand that that's what you're there to do, and by the way, I don't think most assistants understand that that's what you're there to do either, because when I ask you, you don't give me the right answer 9 times out of 10 either. But when they do understand that that is what your role is, all of a sudden everything changes, because they understand that you are contributing to the bottom line, and that for every minute of their salary that you are saving the organization, that minute of their salary drops to the bottom line. And that is before they spend the time that you saved them going and doing a myriad of things that they otherwise wouldn't have had time to do. And that's before you're helping their mental health. You know, when I had my first assistant, I used to sit there thinking, I can't give her that to do. If I give her that to do, I'm not doing my job. I'm being lazy. And the result was that I burnt out and she was born witless. So, you know, it's about, if you think your executives know what you should be doing, they don't. They have no clue. And if you follow that it's the business that's employing you, your organization that employs you, not your executive, I think you have a duty to explain to them what it is you're there to do and how you add value to the bottom line.
And if I may, one way to do something today about what Lucy B just so beautifully said is to make sure you have, each and every one of you has an up to the minute, detailed, accurate job description about what you're actually doing and the ways in which it saves your executive time. You know, if you can show what you're doing with the benefit of it, then that will be a new conversation. So many assistants I speak with do not have a current, up to the minute, detailed job description. And that way you have the answer when somebody says, so what do you do exactly? What do you do? You know, you're working from home, you know, out of sight, out of mind. Unless we say it, unless we present documentation, it's easy for people to get confused about what you all do.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of impact-led CVs and impact-led job descriptions. So it's not just what I do, it's how I do it and what that means. And then when you start to demonstrate to people, this is what I do, and this is what that means for this organization, the people's body language changes, they have those aha moments, and that understanding of the power is a game changer. And I think that piece talk about in terms of job descriptions is so important, because most job descriptions for assistants aren't updated for years and years and years. Or we as a recruiter receive the same job description for every single EA role that they're hiring in the business. They're completely disposable. They're not useful descriptions whatsoever.
They're overly generic. They're
completely generic. That's the word.
They're obsolete. So, but here's the thing that I must say before we finish, and oh my God, it just went out of my head. Oh my gosh. Right. We're going to finish. I'm so panicked. We're going to finish this up.
While you're thinking, what I'm going to say is that if you're not writing a job description that reflects what you're actually doing, then how are they going to measure what you're doing against it to see whether you are performing above or below it? And I'm sorry to keep going on about Global Skills Matrix, but Global Skills Matrix will show
Never be
you at
sorry
each
to ever
level
mention that,
what you
mate.
should be doing in terms of the kind of tasks and the kind of skills you should have at each level. It'll show you where you need to learn skills so that you can get promotion. But also we now have the competencies there as well. And what that means is that for the very first time, your HR departments, your executives, rather than going, oh, she's a nice girl, he's a nice guy, they manage my calendar nicely, let's give them a pay rise. Everybody is going to be able to see exactly within your administrative function what needs to be done in order to rise up the ranks and for people to see that you are exceptional at your role. And that's what I want. Just like everybody else in the organization who is seen as an SME, a subject matter expert in their particular area, you are a subject matter expert, just like finance, just like marketing, just like sales. You know your thing. And the Global Skills Matrix allows the organization to see that.
Right. And I remembered what I was about to say, that
Go for it.
one of the skills that assistants have is the ability to evaluate a job description. So that was why I was horrified when it was revealed that AI created a job description, which was really, if you all analyzed it, you would be able to say like, oh my gosh, that's 3 people. Those are 3 full-time jobs. That's what we need to do. That's what you need. Your skills are uniquely qualified to evaluate what's really in front of you, to say, that can happen, but it's a 2-person job or a 3-person job. That's where we're at.
Well, closing comments from all 3 of us. And I think that somebody said to me yesterday, one of the assistants I was working with, we were talking about some of these aspects where change could be created. And they said, but surely this is the company's job. Well, if we argue with reality, we're going to lose 100% of the time because this is not on the top of their agenda, but it's on the top of ours. And so we have got to be the ones that are pushing the agenda and making sure that it cannot be ignored. That's my last little comment. So Lucy and Bonnie, closing comments.
I would say, courtesy of Simone White again, actually, that no minority has ever had itself change from the outside. It's down to you to put the point of view across. So be the change. We are a minority in the companies that we work in. We're not valued in the way that we should be, but only you can go and have those conversations. Don't wait for somebody else. Time is short. Go do the thing.
Mm-hmm. My final words are, please, 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 if you're not already following each of us on LinkedIn, follow the 3 of us and the people on this chat, because that's our gold. The people of this profession are our biggest resource. And additionally, what I see is that there are some amazing assistants all over the world who are achieving wonderful things. To those of you who are achieving at the highest levels, I urge you to look back, put your hand back, reach back, and send the elevator back down. Others. The future is going to be about mentoring and about elevating others for the pipeline. Where is the future of this role if not to nurture and mentor those coming up behind us? So send the elevator back down, will you?
Absolutely. And of course, we're going to share Bonnie and Lucy's books, because if you haven't got them, honestly, they are the most fantastic platform to stand on to gain the courage to take the action that's needed. And do share your takeaways on LinkedIn. It's the way that we start to raise the roof, so we're not in an echo chamber, just talking to each other about it, so that we can raise that awareness. We don't want to be in an echo chamber. So share your takeaways. We'll share them too. And thank you for being a part of this. I'm always so grateful that Bonnie and Lucy to take time out to be with us all. We are very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Thank you,
Great.
Lucy C. And Lucy B. Mwah. Love hanging out with you.
See you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Lock on.